dawn of a new era at Mercedes-Benz globally as the company pushes out one new electric car after another. The Mercedes-Benz EQB is the compact yet roomy offering based on the GLB class in some ways. There are three variants on the EQB here in the German market. You get the EQB 250, which is front-wheel drive only. You then have the 300, which is 4MATIC but has a little bit less power. Similar kind of range though to the 350, which gives you the most powerful performance. But in India, which one can we expect? That is the question you have. It's not the 250, it's not likely to be the 350. What we should really be thinking about is the 300 because it's a sort of best of both worlds kind of thing. And yes, being an SUV from Mercedes-Benz in India, it's hardly likely that we'll ever get one that does not have 4MATIC on it. I am in Stuttgart and testing the vehicle's top spec, the EQB 350 4MATIC. But the dynamics and overall trim are still similar to the 300 that we are getting. Now to begin with, the EQB will be a CBU, which is a completely built import. It will at some point transition to becoming locally built as well. Where I'm going with this is that that's the model that will get even more customization that is India specific. So in the meanwhile, you will get the car that's closer to the stock vehicle available here in Germany with options that are available for the European market. In terms of seat height, you will feel a typical SUV driving position and therefore a driving experience that's more SUV-like. But in terms of the way the car handles, especially its steering, it has a smaller, more compact car feel. To me, both those things being married into one vehicle is actually a good thing because it gives you better maneuverability, more comfort and better on-road dynamics, and yet fulfills that whole requirement of being a big SUV. That's something that everybody really always wants. The EQB shares a fair amount with the Mercedes-Benz GLB, including body panels. That is why the EQB has the same silhouette and stance as the GLB. The EQS is built on an electric-only platform, which means that cars derived from the start just to be electric. The EQC, on the other hand, the first electric from Mercedes-Benz, was definitely a derived platform. It came from the GLC. In this case, you have a somewhat in-between situation. So it's called EVA 1.5, electric vehicle architecture. But the 1.5 shows you that it's kind of 1.5, it's in between, which means that while it is an electric platform in its layout, it still takes a lot of the components from the GLB in this case. So, well, that's just a little bit of a background on this car for you. Now you see this thick cladding that helps the SUV character always, but you also see this chrome stripe down the middle. That's sort of indicative of where the battery sits in this car, a little nod to the electrification from the stylists. At the back, you see the connected taillights. That's very much on trend, but the way it's laid out and the kind of pattern you have is a signature for the EQB. Given the market trends, it is no surprise Mercedes has been expanding its SUV range, and that reflects on the EV side too. So in India, we of course know the GLA and we know the GLC. We never quite got the GLB. That might change. I will talk about that in just a bit. The point I am trying to make is that it sits in between those two cars in terms of size, and because EQB is based on the GLB in some senses, that's the kind of proportion you're going to get. That's the kind of footprint and size you're going to get. The part that is exaggerated and different to those two is just how big the greenhouse on this car is, just the proportion of glass to metal. It does sit a little bit taller, this car. It does come across, therefore, as having its own character in terms of proportion. EQB badge tells you it's all electric. Even the energy efficient wheel pattern and that particular, design, we're not still sure what will come to India, but that looks nice and upmarket. In the front, EQ character, because that design language has now taken its final shape in a sense. You saw the start with the EQC, you've seen it now on the EQS. All black treatment, and this shape of the grille is typical of EQ models. and so is the blue element right here inside the headlamp cluster. The EQB is smart, and this rose gold exterior paint color sure stands out. It also features inside the car's cabin in a big way. The car's interior is distinct enough and yet familiar Mercedes-Benz territory. The cool MBUX double screen layout with attractive graphics and a now familiar functionality. The virtual instrument cluster can be customized to also give you EV specific readouts like battery range, etc. The central touchscreen has connectivity, entertainment, and car feature controls, as you'd expect. It's the sense of space in this cabin that will impress you. All that glass coverage I was talking about earlier, well, it also contributes to that. You get a good view of the outside environment and a sense of airiness in the cabin. Where it could have been better, maybe the seat height itself a little bit better for an SUV and better under thigh support. But you know what? The India spec might have a more plump seat, also one that's more plush than this. You'll probably see a more high-end version of this cabin on the India spec, but good on legroom, great on headroom. And the other big difference that we will get in India, what you see here is the 5-seat version, because of course in Germany that's going to be more popular. But here there is an option of a 7-seat version as well, where the third row is strictly for children. That is what we will get in our market as standard. That will give us the first 3-row electric vehicle in the passenger car space in the country. And the seats will still fold up to give you more boot space if needed. The rose gold accents on the AC vents will be standard for India, by the way. Yeah, that color does stand out and kind of grows on you, doesn't it? It also looks a little upmarket and sophisticated. Now, while the EQB does share a lot with the GLB in terms of components, it's obviously not true in terms of how it drives. There is a distinct difference to the character that comes from any electric car versus its ICE counterpart. Here, it's not just the same car that's been converted in any case, so the dynamics are completely different. The car accelerates very well. You can put it into sport mode to really sort of get that full energetic feeling. It has different modes like every Mercedes, so there's individual, sport, comfort, and eco. On eco is where it suddenly pulls you back. It doesn't give you very quick acceleration, but then of course that's designed to be more efficient, to save some of the battery power. The EQB 350 specs are on your screen, but I have also thrown in the specs of the India-bound variant. The numbers are healthy and the car's performance is more impressive than you would have expected. The battery is a 66.5 kilowatt-hour pack, and the car uses an asynchronous motor in the front and a permanently excited synchronous motor at the rear. Having two separate motors for the front and back really does enhance the overall handling feel. You get a much better sense of grip than what you'd expect from a car of this height and size. And the steering just complements that effort, making it a lot more fun to drive than I had expected. Yes, there is a distinct advantage that the 4MATIC system gives you, and that is different in an EV for sure, given the instant availability of torque. Regenerative driving is a pretty common thing on all electric vehicles. It is exactly like that with the EQB2. But while it's kind of similar to the system we saw on the EQC, here there is one difference in the different levels of regeneration that you can achieve, because you do use the paddle shifters. You can go D plus, where there's absolutely no resistance and you get no regeneration whatsoever, or then you can go to D, where you get a little bit of that resistance and therefore a little bit of the energy gets recuperated. And then you got D minus, which is almost single pedal driving. Now all of that is similar to what you had on the EQC, Where it gets different is that there is no D-. So what you have is something called D Auto. The Auto, that's a mode where the car literally sort of gauges all the temperature and climatic conditions. It also gauges what the navigation is telling it in terms of data, and also what it's picking up in terms of any kind of traffic information. And it gives you the right kind of regeneration that it would require. So it kind of errs on the side of more regeneration, but it does it all automatically. The auto mode is actually pretty smart, and if you don't drive with a very heavy foot, you get better range. The claimed mileage by WLTP standards is 419 kilometers. In India, we should expect a similar claim on the car. The GLB is also a car that's being considered for India. Finally, the Jalebi, as I have called it in the past. And of course, that means that effectively the EQB kind of replaces the EQC. Not just in India, by the way, that'll happen pretty much worldwide. The great part about this car is going to be its ride quality, its SUV feel, its on-road comfort and dynamics. So what's the bad part? You know what? I honestly can't think of one right now, except its potential pricing. Expect the EQB to arrive by the festive season. The GLB may also join it, but there is still a lot to be seen in terms of global model allocation and supply constraints. But for starters, I am looking forward to the EQB 300 4MATIC. To recap, we will get the 7-seater with all-wheel drive as standard and a fully loaded trim. Expect prices to hover in the 85 lakh rupee range, and it will come with a standard wall box charger included in that price.